Hi there and welcome to the Relish YouTube channel. Today we're talking about becoming a better listener, a step-by-step guide to active listening. So as basic as it sounds, developing good listening skills is one of the most valuable things you can do for your relationship, whether this is romantic, friendship or work. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is in assuming that our listening skills are okay and don't actually need work, when in reality everyone can benefit from developing their skills in this area. If you've ever gone to a therapist or coach and left the session feeling truly heard and validated, it's likely that they were using some key elements of active listening and focusing on building up that sense of understanding, concern, and interest. So, what is active listening? Essentially, it involves paying full attention to what someone's saying and checking in to make sure that you understand their key points. One useful way of understanding what active listening is might be to consider what it is not. If you've ever tried talking to someone who's distracted by their phone or clearly just not paying attention, this is the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. That feeling that you get when you're talking to someone who isn't paying attention, frustrated, annoyed, hurt, devalued, is one that's really detrimental to a relationship. And in building up our listening skills, we hope to move away from these emotions and towards feelings of being understood and being valued by the person you're interacting with. Convinced? Well, here are a few active listening skills that therapists and coaches swear by, and which will help to make your next important conversation go to where you want it to go. First of all, reflecting. So as easy as it sounds, reflecting back what a person says to them can show that you're listening closely and taking in what they're saying. Reflections have the incredible ability to show people that we are on their side. When they hear a validation of their own words coming out of our mouths, resistance and defensiveness can tend to drop away. This technique is often used by therapists in their first session as a tool to show clients that they understand and empathise with their experience. When having a difficult and challenging conversation, for example, talking to someone about a behaviour that you're worried about or giving someone negative feedback, if you can try and reflect at the beginning of the conversation, this tends to help the person relax and let down those walls, as part of them unconsciously understands that you are actually on their side, or at the very least trying to put yourself in their shoes. If you aim for at least 3 reflections, you're off to a good start. It also goes without saying that it is best to use your own words rather than repeating back what they've said. Make sure that you have those key points that they've said included. The second tip is summarising. So similar to reflections, this is a really easy tool to help someone feel heard. It involves drawing together the threads of the conversation at different points, in your own words. This is powerful because the person you're talking to might not have done this themselves, so we don't actually tend to summarise our own internal monologues. And it can be a powerful experience to have all of your concerns reflected back to you. Just like with reflecting, summarising what someone has said to you is evidence that you're listening carefully to them and that you're interested in engaging with what they have to say. A summary is a kind of call to action in some ways, since it allows us to draw together all the parts of the issues. Another tip is to use minimal encourages. So this big word really just means saying, and whatever else you do to show you're listening and want the person to continue. As you can imagine, these are even more important when we're speaking over the phone or via text, where body language and eye contact are much less obvious. If you're wondering why this is so important, cast your mind back to when you've been talking on the phone to someone and there's complete silence. You can't be sure whether you've been disconnected or maybe they're just not listening to you. We tend to use minimal encourages naturally in our communication, but it's useful to pay close attention to them when we're having these really important conversations. So just like reflections, they convey that we're listening closely, want the person to continue talking, and are receptive to what they're saying, even if we don't necessarily agree. Another thing to think about is body language. So have you ever tried to open up to someone who is sitting with their back to you or who is avoiding your eyes? It's almost impossible to get into the flow of conversation with someone who's either giving you hostile signals, crossed arms, frowning, or standing over you, or completely blanking you, so doing things like avoiding eye contact, turning their back, turning their face away from yours. When we see threatening body language, our survival part of the brain is activated and we go into fight or flight. This is the emotional state that can override our attempts to communicate effectively. It is for this reason that body language might be actually one of the most important parts of active listening, and if we can get this right, it gives us a good chance of having an open and productive conversation. Again, this only really applies to face-to-face encounters. If you're using text or phone, you'll need to work on the minimal encourages to actually do the heavy lifting. Some of the key things to consider though with body language are, firstly, how are you sitting? So posture and direction make a big difference. So ideally you'll be facing the speaker, perhaps slightly at an angle with an open posture. So no crossed arms and not hunched over. Depending on the setup, the person should be able to see your face and recognise that your body language is non-threatening and relaxed. Secondly, what are you doing with your face? Eye contact is key here, but of course we don't want to maintain constant eye contact. That is both creepy and potentially intimidating. An interested and calm expression with appropriate eye contact means that you won't be distracting them as they talk. You might be nodding or keeping your eyes on their face to monitor their emotional state. Another thing to consider, are you mirroring them? One useful skill when it comes to body language is mirroring, where we might adopt a similar posture or expression to the person who's talking to us. Most of us do this unconsciously. For example, when we talk to a sad person, we aren't likely to be overly cheerful, but talking to an excited or happy person, and we're likely to kick it up a notch. If we can be somewhat deliberate about this when listening, again it sends signals that we're in sync with that person. This might be adopting a similar posture, for example, crossing legs or leaning back in the chair, adjusting our speed of talking or energy level to match theirs. So if someone talks slowly and deliberately, we might want to slow down a bit too. We've probably all seen somebody try and mirror someone, and that also comes across as a bit creepy. This is the last thing you want to be doing. The idea more is that we're trying to get into sync with that person and show them that we're ready to meet them where they're at, and that they can feel comfortable in opening up to us. In conclusion, active listening is quite a bit more complicated than it appears at first, but it definitely is a great skill to develop. An important caveat is that active listening can be difficult to follow while the person is saying something that we don't actually agree with, but this is actually when it's at its most valuable. The more we can get someone to talk about an issue and encourage them to open up and engage in a discussion, the better chance we have of getting our own point across and engaging in an actual conversation instead of a fight or an argument. Using active listening appropriately means that we give ourselves the chance to clarify and absorb the other person's viewpoint, as well as to allow the other person the chance to articulate what they want to say and also start to consider our point of view. So I hope this is helpful and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.